Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Terri Cole Show that I want to start with a question. Do you know what your boundary style is? And if you do you know how that boundary style might be negatively impacting you and your relationships? We all have a particular style that's a predominant style, and a lot of times it can get in the way of us living authentically. So if you're curious about that, that's what this entire video is going to be about today. I'm going to be teaching you the difference between rigid and porous boundaries, how having rigid or porous boundaries might be negatively impacting the quality of your life, and steps that you can take towards more healthy boundaries. So before we get into it, if you happen to be new, I found out from my data that there are zillions of you watching and not subscribed. Why? Go do it right now. It's FREE, and all this content is free, and I do it for you. So what you can do for me is you can subscribe, because it actually does help me and my numbers. So please go do that, and make sure you hit that bell icon so that you get notified every time I roll out something new, which is every Tuesday and every Thursday. Because really, if not for you, I wouldn't be doing it. You are literally the people I'm doing it for. Thank you for all your questions and your comments. You know I love it. Most normal people watch Netflix. Me, I just read all my comments all weekend long on this YouTube channel. That is the truth. And I love to highlight your comments. So this is from Carol 7 Roberts, and this is under the video, Build Unshakable Confidence with These 5 Tips. Excellent message. Thank you, Terri, for your invaluable wisdom and insights. I have your book, Boundary Boss, and it's an invaluable resource. Thanks for blessing us with this good and perfect gift. Why, Carol, thank you for saying so. I super appreciate you taking the time to leave that comment. Truly does warm my heart. All right, shall we move into today's content? I think we shall. So, someone in my VIP group, which you guys could also join if you would like to, I'll give you the information in the show notes. They had questions about rigid boundaries. So she basically said she tended towards being an automatic no when people asked her to do things rather than an automatic yes, right? And you'll know a lot of times I'll talk about when you have porous boundaries, you may say yes when you really want to say no. And she's saying, I actually say no more, sort of in an automatic way, as a way of protecting myself. How can I turn that around? And she said, I'm very protective of my time, because growing up, I saw how much resentment my mother had from agreeing to do everything, like for all the people. And so it's almost like in her adult life, she's overcorrected. So she's gone the other way to just be like a no. So thank you to my VIP person, because that's what inspired me to actually do this video about it. There are 3 basic boundary styles, and I would highly suggest, if you have not taken my boundary quiz, you should go do that right now, because that will be super illuminating. It's only 13 questions. It'll take you 10 minutes to do, but you will end up being one of the archetypes, and that will be really helpful. So go to boundaryquiz.com, just boundaryquiz.com, and it's totally free. And I think it'll be really helpful for you to get an idea of where you are right now. What is your style of disordered boundaries? Because we all have them. Maybe there's some places where you're doing great, and then there's areas. A lot of times I have women in my practice who are really good at boundaries at work and then really bad at boundaries in their romantic relationship. So everyone is different, though. So that's why I'm talking about it today. So let's talk a little bit about the 3 basic boundary styles. So you have porous boundaries. What does this mean? This means that your style of boundaries are too malleable, too loose, like you're too easily swayed. This is where you say yes when you really want to say no. You might also overshare personal information and be overly invested in the problems and issues of others. All of this comes along with having boundaries that are too porous. So imagine it. It's kind of like having a house, and if you have porous boundaries, you don't have a front door. So anyone can come in or out, or you don't have a fence around the house or a front door, let's just say. And people can come in and take what they want and leave. When you think about that, how does that thought leave you feeling? It's not a good feeling, right? You're unprotected, because really with porous boundaries, we make ourselves too vulnerable to people who may not be emotionally trustworthy, right? Feeling like we have to say yes when we'd really rather say no, or having the inability to set limits with other people. Someone asks you to help them with a project, and they'd like you to help them all day on Saturday. And if you have Decent boundaries, you could say, I can help you from 12 to 2. But a lot of times we feel like if the other person has said they need you all day, you don't feel okay asserting your limits, right? Because that is what boundaries are. When we establish what are our boundaries, there are preferences, desires, limits, and deal breakers. Meaning the deal breakers are our non-negotiables when it comes to stuff in our relationships. Think about, why might we end up having porous boundaries? Well, a lot of times we were people pleasers, right? What do they say? There's a whole quote about people pleasers were originally parent pleasers. So a lot of times asserting our boundaries in childhood, depending on the family system that you grew up in, could mean getting in trouble, could mean having love withdrawn from you if it was a chaotic or a really disordered system. If there was abuse, then putting up a boundary could mean you really get hurt, like it could be dangerous. So a lot of times we just learned not to. And most of us, when you really think about women in particular, were raised and praised for being self-abandoning codependents, I love to say, only because it's true. The more helpful you are, the better. But all of that home training can result in porous adult boundaries in your relationships. All right, so let's move into what is the other end of the spectrum of porous boundaries. So porous is too malleable, too soft, too movable, and rigid boundaries. This is too inflexible. If you have rigid boundaries, you might be someone who is very unlikely to ask for help from other people. You also might not have the ability to tell people that you're upset. When we're emotionally rigid, a lot of times we'll just get withdrawn in anger, or we'll sort of punish people by withdrawing ourselves from them rather than telling them how they hurt our feelings. Rigid boundaries a lot of times will be people who are really good at their jobs. Like they can be really productive and smart, but they also can be like my way or the highway. That if you don't want to do it my way, I'll do it my way without you. It's almost like just barreling forward if you have rigid boundaries. And a lot of times you don't trust other people. So a lot of times that minimizes the closeness that you have in your life. And exactly like the VIP person from my group who shared that she's an automatic sort of no, there's a rigidness to what she shared. Right? It's like immediately putting up a wall, or I don't want to be vulnerable, or I don't want to be on the hook, or I don't want to be obligated to you. And so anything that we're doing as a reaction, anything that we're doing in an automatic fashion, we know is not a choice, right? We know that that is some kind of an ingrained behavior. And so there's nothing wrong with saying no to the VIP person, right? There's nothing wrong with saying no. If it's a mindful and a thoughtful no, of course we're allowed to say no. But the same way you don't want to auto yes people, you don't want to auto no people, and you don't want to do that in your life because these are not authentic responses. They are simply reactions. And so one thing that I think could be really helpful before I get into talking about healthy boundaries and what they are is making the connection between meditation and mindfulness practices and having the ability to pause before you give a reaction, before you give a reactive yes or a reactive no. Meditation is probably the most impactful thing that changed my reactivity in my life. And I've been meditating for over 20 years, but it really did change my life. And one of the biggest changes was that I gained about 2 to 3 seconds of reaction time in every situation that I found myself in. Now think about that. How much would your relationships change if you gained 2 to 3 seconds of response time? Because mine changed a lot. There were so many less apologies from me. I also learned that I could ask for time, that I could say I need to think about something, that I don't owe someone an automatic answer, whether that's a yes or a no. And I think a lot of us feel very compelled, especially if you were raised to be a good girl. We feel compelled to give people an answer. We don't want to be rude. You know, being nice was like the do-all, end-all of our lives. The holy grail of womanhood is being considered nice. And yet we all know at this point that that is not true. And if you're saying yes when you want to say no, you're not being nice. You're being dishonest, but it's the way that we were trained. And so much of what we're doing in adult life school is we are unlearning these things that we learned in childhood. And again, we don't have to blame our parents. We can blame our parents, our parental impactors, the adults who raised you. We can, and we don't have to, because the reality is we're here now. So what matters is, how do I heal now? How do I grow now? How do I change now? How do I get better boundaries now? And yet, the origin story does matter. I don't say we don't need to go back, because we do. We need to understand why we are the way we are. And the more we do understand that, the easier it is to have compassion for ourselves instead of being so hard on ourselves. Okay, long way around the barn. Coming on back to, let's talk about healthy boundaries. What are they? Healthy boundaries are basically, as I said at the top, the sweet spot in between too loose and too rigid boundaries. So what does it mean? It means that you're flexible. If you have healthy boundaries, your boundaries are flexible. It means that you can compromise. It doesn't have to be my way or the highway, or you're not endlessly taking one for the team. It's in between that. So what does it look like to compromise? It means your partner wants to go to bed at midnight. You like to go to bed at 9. The nights you want to go to bed together, you decide to go to bed at 10:30, and there you have it. That's a compromise, right? It means that we're flexible enough to meet in the middle, or flexible enough to listen to what the other person has to say. And hopefully they are flexible enough to listen to what we have to say. When you have healthy boundaries, you have good self-respect. You have high self-esteem, right? You know that your time is valuable, right? You know what you think, how you feel, and what you want matters to you when you have healthy boundaries that you can assert, because that's what it's all about. You share personal information in an appropriate way. We wait until find out if someone is emotionally trustworthy before we spill our guts to them. We do it gradually, and it's mutual sharing in a trusting relationship. That's having healthy boundaries. We protect our physical and emotional space from intrusion. I do this in many ways. And the things that make me feel intruded on probably wouldn't make you feel intruded on. But like, I never have my phone ringer on, simply because I don't want to. Some people in my life wish I did. That's okay. If they text me, I'm good with my phone. It's near me during the day. If someone texts me and it's important, I'll get back to them immediately. But it's at my pleasure. It's my decision. So I don't care that my best friend wishes my ringer was on, or my sister. My ringer's not on, because I don't want it on. So again, I'm protecting my peace by all the things that I do in my life, but that's just one way. And there's lots of different ways that you can protect your peace and your space. And definitely not saying yes when you really want to say no, right? That is one of them. Being honest, setting limits with other people, having an equal partnership, right? Where we're not doing all the emotional labor in the relationship. And listen, when I say equal, I don't mean perfectly equal, right? Vic does some things that I don't do. I do some things that Vic doesn't do, but we're both on the team. We're both always thinking, oh, the dishwasher's done, I'll put the dishes away. Whoever gets up last makes the bed. Like, there's a mutual sharing in the way that we live our lives that feels equitable. And if it doesn't, when I'm writing a book, Vic is doing more than that. And, after 9 months, that shit gets old, and he is such an amazing team player, but I know he's pretty happy that the most recent book writing process is coming to a close. And at least the hardest part is over, so that I can go back to doing something, because really he was doing everything for a very long time. But I appreciate that partnership. And then when he's working on a big project or doing a big book, I'm the one picking up the slack. So there is a mutuality in what we do. When you have healthy boundaries, you can be assertive. You can truthfully, confidently say yes and confidently say no, right? Back to the question that started this whole video about her automatically saying no. But when you have healthy boundaries, you're not automatically doing anything. You are thoughtfully saying yes or thoughtfully saying no. And you are asserting that without a problem. You also can separate your own needs, thoughts, feelings, and desires from other people, right? You don't take on someone else's emotional stuff, right? Your needs and your boundaries, you recognize that they are different than other people. And that took me years in therapy to figure out. I couldn't stop judging people for not being like me. I couldn't stop projecting onto people in a positive way that they were like me. I mean, and wow, I got burned obviously many times doing that. But I learned again, but that was a disordered emotional boundary within me that I was doing those things. And another quality of having healthy boundaries is that you emotionally empower yourself, right? To make healthy choices and take responsibility for those choices, for your own happiness, for what it is that you want in life. So let's talk a little bit about how can we move towards healthier boundaries, right? First of all, know that it's a long game. Life is a long game. Mental health is a long game. Good relationships are a long game. Nothing happens overnight. So don't expect instant success. It doesn't happen. Your first thing you have to do is get clear on your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers so that you can clearly communicate them. And I'm going to give you some stuff in the guide to help guide you on this. terricole.com/guide is where you'll find these prompts. And then I really want you to think about resentment. Where are you feeling resentment? You'll do a quick resentment inventory because that is telling you where you either have boundaries that are too porous or boundaries that are too rigid. Right? And maybe you can find a way to meet in the middle. Maybe you can find a way to step back or to step forward in those situations, depending on which way you have to get. Another thing is getting clear on your own boundary blueprint. I'll give you a couple of questions so that you can. Because here's the thing. Again, like I said before, the more you know about why you are the way you are, the less judgmental you're going to be. And it is so unhelpful for you to be judgmental of yourself. It does not help. But a deeper understanding of like, oh, it makes total sense that I ended up being a people pleaser, coming from a long line of people pleasers. Okay, I can change that. But it sort of lifts a weight when we have a deeper understanding of our boundary blueprint. And the other thing I wanted to tell you, make sure that you do it, is go take the boundary quiz. It's just boundaryquiz.com, and that's super easy breezy, 13 questions. It's going to take you 10 minutes, but it'll be really super helpful. And I'm also going to give you some links in the guide, terricole.com/guide, for ways of getting your boundary scripts together, right? How to state boundaries. So this will be just a helpful reference for you when you get to the point that you are ready. And you also want to, obviously, you can get my book, Boundary Boss, just walks you through every step of the way, every possible scenario you could ever be in boundary-wise, and it walks you through why you are the way you are. So anyway, I would love to hear from you. If this episode of The Terri Cole Show was helpful to you, did you learn something? I certainly hope that you did. I hope you guys have the most amazing week, and as always, take care of you.